Oh, they started doing that. It freaks me out. I've only had it a couple times. Yes. So this meeting is being recorded. So, but those of you joining, it's all anonymous. So you are not seeing your questions. You can ask anonymously, and we do have a question. So so hi Troy Love. Let's start with that. Take a breath.
Hello there.
So
Hi. How are you, Tammy?
clearly going about 100 miles an hour today. So I'm going to just take a breath and ground myself for a moment, but thrilled to have you here again. So Troy does the fourth week of the month every Wednesday he's here in this spot, and it's always, a gift. For those of you who are partners, he has started on Thursdays at 11 a.m. Pacific time, alternating Thursdays, attachment wounds, just for partners. And then on Friday, he has a group for guys, every week. And so please, if you like and there's a whole bunch of recorded too, if you like what you're seeing, join those as appropriate too. So, but we have a question, Troy. How does a couple who both have neglect and abandonment attachment wounds interrupt the cycle of connection and disconnection when emotions are present, addict, disconnect, and reaction by partner? That's a great question because they're both identifying the wounds. That's a great question. So how do you navigate that?
I love that question. So there's a couple things to consider when we're looking at these wounds being stirred up, and one of them is taking a look at how are we showing up? Are we coming to this relationship from our wounded, younger, like child self? Are we coming to this relationship from our adult self? And it's really, really hard to come to the relationship from our adult self, who's able to think rationally and think through things, because when our wounds get stirred up, it's activating that fight or flight response, and we are automatically being pulled into that self-protection place. I was just listening to a book by Stephen Stosny this morning, and he said the two tasks that I think are the hardest for adults is, number one, to find value and love for ourselves when the other person is behaving in a way that we don't like.
Mhm.
And then task number two is finding love and value in the other person when we are behaving in a way that we don't like. So it falls right into this question that you're asking of, like, we're both of our wounds are being triggered. We can even see the cycle happening. What do we do? So Sue Johnson, in her emotionally focused couples therapy work, often recommends that the couples give that cycle a name. Give it a name so that we can call it out. Now, I get that that doesn't always solve the problem or doesn't always take us out of that cycle in that moment, but we can, if we can give it a name, then part of the intention with that is, hey, we are doing that thing, and I know that that's not what I want to do, and I know that it isn't what you want to do either. So can we take a time out and then try to do this again? John Gottman's research shows that a timeout has to take at least 20 minutes, because that's about how long it takes for our brains to be able to calm down after a fight or flight response trigger has happened. And so if we try to go right back into it, even if you feel like, I'm calmed down, it's only been 10 minutes, your brain is still doing its thing. So that he says at least 20 minutes. I tell couples like 30 minutes at least, give it 30 minutes and maybe an hour. The important thing is that you come back, because I'm an avoider, so I like to call it out and then like run away and then pretend that that never happened, and that doesn't work very well. And so that may be helpful. Say, hey, we're doing that thing. We're doing the death spiral. We're playing in the sandbox again, whatever. Those are some of the names that some couples have called it. Let's take a break and come back. When you take a break, the rules are there can't be any last words. There just can't be any last words, because then you're going to be right back in the cycle again. So those are a couple of tangible things that you can do in the moment when it's happening, but that doesn't really solve what you do for why it came back. So when you come back together, part of what you are wanting to do is, number one, connect with your own sense of value. You've acknowledged that you have a neglect wound and you have an abandonment wound. You've acknowledged that your partner is also having a neglect and probably a betrayal wound that's being provoked. This is a really, really hard concept for people to understand. But once a couple can figure this out, I think it is huge. When a guy is acting out sexually or drinking, or whoever, not a guy, does it? I'm just using that as an
A
example.
person, but
A
yes,
person
gotcha.
is acting out. That is their attempt to try and take care of their wounds in an unhealthy way. It is not a reflection on how they feel about their partner. It's actually a reflection on how they feel about themselves, to be honest. And if the partner can understand that that is actually a cry for help, it's not their job to fix it, really, but it is a cry for help, that they are bleeding and that their little one is hurting inside, and they need to do some wound care around that. If I can see that, then I might not take it as personally when my partner slips or acts out, because I can see that, like, look, that is evidence that you've got some pain going on and you still haven't learned how to manage that pain in a healthy way. I want to support you in that. I want to encourage you in that. I don't want to continue to inflict more pain in that, because I can understand that that will encourage the cycle on your end. And I can also acknowledge, if I'm the betrayed partner, that I'm also hurting, that I have wounds too, but I also need to connect with my own sense of value and worth. So when two people are coming together and I remember that I'm worthy of love and belonging, regardless of way that my partner was treating me, whether I'm the addict or the betrayed partner, I'm worthy of love and belonging regardless of way others are treating me. If I can hold on to that, and that's a huge skill that we have to learn. If I can hold on to that, though, I can hold space. And then maybe I will have the courage to share a little bit more about the pain that was actually underneath that. That probably had nothing to do with my spouse or my partner. I can listen to the pain that my partner is trying to share and show up with empathy, with an intent to try and make things better, to try and improve the situation, to try and support the situation. And we're coming from it from a loving, supportive perspective. When I've watched couples do that, it's beautiful. It is such a beautiful thing. Because one of the principles that I tell people all the time, I know I'm just like pouring stuff out, but hopefully it's okay, is what I think I'm upset about is never what I'm really upset about. And so if I can take a moment and actually sit with and identify, what is this really about, and explore that in a way that is safe with my partner, or they can do that with me, there's bonding that happens there, and needs are met, the fighting decreases, connection happens, and we feel back together. And then the key is, okay, how did we do that so that we can do that the next time? What did we do this time, and how do we learn how to do that over and over and over again? Stephen Stosny, in his work, is huge in practice, 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 practice. So he often encourages his clients to imagine how they want to show up with their partner. Think about a time that they may be triggered. What does that feel like in your body? Then journal. This is how I am intending to show up. Visualizing, this is how I am intending to show up. This is how I want to make things better. This is how I want to show up in a better way. And doing that, he recommends for 6 weeks, doing that every day over and over. And what happens is you start to rewire your brain so that I'm actually doing that. And the principles from the Arbinger Institute say that when I start changing, it changes the way that my partner has somebody to respond to, and then they change because I'm not the same person anymore. It takes a lot of the responsibility, or it takes a lot of the blame away from my partner and says, look, I got to take a look at how I'm going to show up as the adult in this relationship. Not that you're a child, but I'm going to be an adult. I'm going to take care of my wounded self in an adult way. And if I do that, maybe I can also help my partner do that for him or her too. That was a lot.
That was a lot, but it was so good, and I'm sitting here processing, and I almost teared up because when you said, like the situation, I forgot exactly what you said, but my brain went to, it isn't what is happening, it's how I'm reacting to it. It's an old thing, and I had that recently, where something happened, and like my reaction, my knee jerk reaction was going to be, about this particular thing, but I realized, it was about an attachment wound. It was an abandonment wound, and I was like, I'm feeling it on that level, even though this little thing, which was somebody did something, it was completely unintentional, it wasn't personal, but that's what it dinged up against. And when you're talking about, that it touches on the wounds, I'm like, I think it pokes them. I think that stuff is like, you got a deep gash and somebody's going like this, that's what it feels like. So it's really challenging to be able to take a step back, but so freeing. We had Harriet Hunter do a session earlier this month about journaling. And so when you're talking about journaling, I mean, there's proven research about how journaling changes things and positively impacts and all that. But I also hear you talking intentionality about, like, you have to do these things, you have to do them for 6 weeks, because magically, just thinking, oh, if I do this and then it's all going to magically change. And, all I have to do is be aware of it. Like, I've had a lot of people that said, oh, I read a book and whatever. I'm like, if it was just reading a book, and like, we'd all read a book and we'd all be fine, and that's not what it is. So the rewiring, it takes time, because the hard wiring is to the old reactions. So if we want to do something new, we have to practice it. And I love that you're talking about practicing it not in the moment. Like, I'm going to practice having intention so that I'm prepared. So when the moment happens, I can go to the new wiring instead of automatically to the old wiring. So great
Absolutely.
stuff. So,
Thank you.
so okay.
I,
Other
I,
questions? Go ahead.
I had a client. I had a couple the other day, and the client said, "I don't really. I grew up in a home where there was a lot of love. Like, I really don't feel like I have that many attachment wounds, but I definitely have a neglect wound right now. My wife has decided to go to school again. She's busy, and she's gone a lot. So I have a neglect wound that I feel is pretty triggered now, but I don't feel like I had that growing up. That may or may not be true. I don't know. But the principle that I said is like, look, some of these wounds, I think for a lot of us, these wounds were created when we were kids. That doesn't mean that if it was created last week, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean that for a lot of betrayal partners, you may not have had a betrayal wound when you were growing up. You may not have. I know a lot who didn't. I know a lot who did, but I know a lot who didn't. But all of a sudden you discover on D-Day this big old thing that you didn't know about. That's a pretty massive betrayal wound that you maybe just discovered a year ago. Regardless of the length of the wound, it doesn't, or how old it is, it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. It still hurts. What the principle is what am I going to do for wound care around the wound? And so I can make it about this one thing. You didn't come home on time tonight. Why didn't you come home when you said you were going to come home, and make it about that, which it's not really about that. It's really about, well, I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm taking care of all the kids all by myself, and I've been doing it for an entire semester, and I'm exhausted, and I'm wanting some support, and so my neglect wound is really raw right now, and having that conversation versus well, you didn't come home last night, and starting to go into what I call the burpees, blaming, all those kind of things. So hopefully
Well,
that's
but it takes practice, and really what you're talking about is vulnerability and intimacy. We talk about this all the time, is like intimacy is being vulnerable, and it's hard to go, I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling like, like I don't have enough us time. I don't, rather than going, you aren't doing, I mean, it's the blame game is really easy. It's a more powerful and safer because you're pushing somebody away. So where otherwise you're going, wow, I'm going to show you who I am and where I'm hurt, and I'm going to have the potential for you to go, well, I don't care if you're feeling neglected and whatever, that's a vulnerable place to be in. It's where real relationships are. I mean, that's where the real connection is, and healthy relationships are built on that. So, but it's challenging, particularly as addicts who have, gone to escape, and partners who are going, every time I try to reach out, he shuts down. And I'm using he and she, don't, but it's anybody. But I hear that all the time. Every time I try to talk about something, he shuts me down. So there isn't that space for communication and connection. It ends up being, here we are basically at a standoff. So that question where, hey, we're both, tapping into our wounds, what do we do, is a great one, because that sounds like a couple that actually wants to not just keep doing the same dance over and over again. So
mm-hmm. Does anybody have other questions? I mean, I have things I can share, but this is an opportunity to answer any of your questions that you have. The easiest way for us to keep track of that is doing the Q&A. You can put it in the chat, but it's
harder for me to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Q&A works really well.
Mm-hmm. So if you have some, that's wonderful. If you don't, then that's okay too. I just read. Let's see. I gotta look it up because I can't remember the names of books. I read so many. It's by the Anasazi Foundation, which is a wilderness therapy program in the Phoenix Valley. But it is. It is called The Five Legends. It's 2 hours on the Audible. That's how I read nowadays. The Anasazi Foundation works with kids who are troubled, and their whole principle is the power of we, which they are somewhat connected with the Arbinger Institute. If you're familiar with the work that they work in the business world a lot, but they do a lot of stuff with families too. They wrote the book Leadership and Self-Deception, and then they had the sequel to that one, which was The Anatomy of Peace, and then The Outward Mindset. And that whole concept that they have is that we are more powerful when we are connected with we rather than I. So what can I do to help make us better? What can I do to help us progress in the workplace, in the home, at school? What can I do to help us as a team thrive and work? And I've seen them use this model with police in law enforcement. I've seen them use it in prisons. I've seen them use it in homes with families, and it's a beautiful model. And there's some elements of it in the work that I do, because when I understand what happens when my wounds get stirred up, is I make it all about me. That's the child part of me. I'm hurting. I want everyone to notice my pain, and I make it all about me, which is understandable, but that will keep me stuck. I will find ways to numb that. I will find ways to deal with that by myself. And the challenge is that everybody else in my family is also wounded too. But when I recognize I'm wounded and so are you wounded, what can I do to help our wounds heal together? that's a different mindset. What can I do to support us? What can I do to help us heal? It's a different mindset that I think is a beautiful one that sometimes is hard to come across, but if we can capture the paradigm, and it goes back to what I said, the hardest lesson that we have to learn is that I have value even when somebody else is behaving badly towards me, and that other person has value even when they're behaving badly towards me. If I can hold on to those two and see that we all have value, it inspires me to behave differently. So
Bunches of questions, but to your point about I mean, that's what 12 steps, that's what, I mean, that's what we,
oh, you just muted yourself.
no, I unmuted.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Okay. So I addicts want to read a book and be better. And I'm like, you can't do this alone. I'm afraid to go to a group. Yes, because that's stepping out, but that's how we heal. So, okay. So first question, do you find that typically anxious attachment style people marry avoidant attachment style people? That seems to be our case.
That is definitely a pattern that happens a lot. There's all kinds of patterns that happen a lot. So uh, I don't know if it is typical. I would say it's common. We tend to, what I tend to see happen is we tend to marry or get into long-term relationships with the partner that is going to actually make us address our issues in ways that we didn't really want, we didn't maybe even know that we had to deal with. And out of all the billions of people on the planet, we picked that one because they are going to make us address our issues, and we're going to make them address their issues if we're willing to look. So it seems like in your case that there's an anxious attachment style who is like the pursuer. Sue Johnson would say that's usually the pursuer in the relationship. Come here, like, please be with me. And then there's usually a withdrawer who pulls away, and that pattern is very common. So there's a pursuer. Whether that pursuer has an anxious attachment style, they may not. They may have a secure attachment style, but they are trying to pursue the other person, and then the other person pulls away. That is pretty common. There's also uh, the withdrawer. Those relationships don't work out that well.
I was thinking, how would you ever? Because everybody's off in their own little places. So
right. And then there usually the pursuers do not come to therapy. They figured out how to come together, but there is usually, that is pretty common. There's a pursuer and a withdrawer, and they're chasing. And so in therapy, we try to help the withdrawer like stay still. And what do you need to feel safe and become more vulnerable so you can open up so that you can be caught, as it were, so that you can build that relationship. We don't have to do as much with the pursuer because they're already like trying to build a relationship. We, at the beginning of the relationship, we try to do a lot with the withdrawer. As time goes on, we help create more safety with both parts, but that's pretty common.
Yeah. And it's, like in addiction, avoiding is, I mean, that's what we do. It's like we're using the acting out to escape and avoid. So, that is a very common theme in this arena. So, okay, next question. Why are they willing to hurt their partner in order to address their wounds? So I'm assuming this is a partner asking about, why does the addict, do what they want to do to take care of themselves rather than being the grown up and being able to step into the space. So
yeah. So the first part, the word that stands out, number one, is willing. Like, why are they willing? I would imagine if you ask the addict if they are willing, they would tell you no. In fact, I would imagine that even while they're doing it, or right after they're doing it, sometimes not as they're doing it, but right after, they're like, what in the world was I doing? This is not going to make things better. this is going to make things worse. Here I am trying to improve my marriage. Here I am trying to improve my relationship. And yet, why in the world am I still doing this? And so the first part of that is that in their wounded place, and this is going to sting a little bit, if in their wounded place, they aren't thinking of anybody but themselves because the pain is so acute. So that's part of why I say, like, if we can come to see that their behaviors are actually a cry for I'm in severe pain, and I haven't learned any other ways of addressing this pain other than doing this, and that it's not actually about you. It's not because you are worth less. It's not because you are not important. It's not because of anything about you. It's I haven't learned how to do that. Now you may say, well, that's great, but I can't be married to that, and that's a whole nother conversation. But that their behavior isn't intentionally trying to inflict harm on their partner. Does it? Yes, it absolutely does. It rips open that betrayal wound so badly. But the intention isn't to do that. And that's the piece that I try to help. I don't know if it makes it any better. I don't think it makes it any better. But the intention isn't to cause harm. They aren't trying to cause harm. They are trying to manage some deep pain that they haven't figured out how to fix yet. The challenge is that it does cause harm. And at the beginning, they have like no ability for empathy. And so they don't have the ability to put themselves in somebody else's shoes and figure out, wow, this really does cause suffering for somebody else. Because they are so wrapped up in shame. The opposite of shame is empathy. People who don't have the capacity to have empathy, well, the only people on the planet who don't have shame are also the people who do not have the capacity for empathy. They're sociopaths. So they are so wrapped up in their shame that they don't have the capacity to have empathy, if that makes sense. But as they begin to learn and heal and grow, then they're like, whoa, they start to let those little pricklings in their heart go. And then that's why we have in the 12 steps, making amends is like at step 8, 9, and 10, like way at the end. They've had a lot of stuff they've had to do first in order to figure themselves out before they're actually able to comprehend the damage that they've done to you, and then be able to say, wow, that really hurt you. And here's what you can expect from me in the future. Here are the amends that I'm going to make. Here's what's going on. The hope is that they'll get there, but in the beginning, they are not purposely trying to hurt you. They are just hurting.
Yeah, and it's not an excuse, but it's a reason, and it still absolutely hurts you. But and people just into, just stopping the behavior, like into the abstinence, like I'm not doing the acting out, like it's really a struggle, and they're dealing with all those prickly feelings that Troy was mentioning. And so it's really hard, and not to just go down the shame, which doesn't really help anybody. So what true recovery is, which takes time, is learning, like Troy was talking about, the tools of 12 step, the tools of recovery are given to those who are intentional about taking them. And then people in the 12-step community teach us how to use them, and then we start changing, and then we start showing up differently. But it isn't just stop the behavior and then magically they're going to have empathy, and they're going to be the person that you always wanted them to be. They don't have they don't have the language, they don't have the skill set, they don't have any of that, but they can learn unless they're a sociopath. Okay. And if everybody's going, yeah, mine's a sociopath. No, they aren't. It just feels like that. So, okay. How do I, as an addict, become better at staying present oh, this is good. During difficult conversations with my spouse, when topics come up that are uncomfortable or they show me strong emotions, I tend to want to withdraw internally and shut down, avoid, and hope that it will just go away. I hear from the partners of this all the time. Like, he just shuts down, and it like they feel like you were just talking about, where they're pursuing and I'm not making any progress, and it's so devastating for partners. So I love that you're asking this question, and Troy's going to answer it.
The number one thing that gets hijacked when we start these conversations is our intent. So I might be sitting there thinking, okay, I am really wanting to be able to be supportive and listen and open-minded to my partner. That's really what I want. And then my partner will say something and it bumps up against my rejection wound, and immediately my intent is, I gotta get out of here. That's not fair. And I get stirred up, and so I'm having a fight or flight response. I'm either gonna fight right now or I'm gonna get out of there right now. So the fact that you are recognizing that is huge, and that's part of where this practice comes in. Of okay, I'm gonna imagine these conversations that I'm have had probably many times with my partner before, and I'm gonna write down how I wanted to have handled that. I'm gonna journal that. I'm gonna journal. This is the situation. This is how I wanted to have handled it. If you could even, I use the right and left hand column a lot. So the right hand column is what happened. I might add a middle column of what did I need in order to be able to respond the way that I wanted to respond. And the key is, it's not your spouse's responsibility to get that need met in that moment, because she or he is not in a place where she has the ability to do that. I came up with this analogy, and I can never remember his name. But there's this. He's all over YouTube. He actually came to Yuma just about 3 weeks ago. He has no arms and legs. I can't remember his name. I should write his name down. But he has no arms and legs. He's a motivational speaker. He goes all around the country. If you remember his name, you can put it in the chat for me. But if I went up to him and said, hey, dude, can you give me a pat on the back? It's impossible. There's no way that he can give me a pat on the back. He can do all kinds of other things for me. He can empathize with me. He can give me words of encouragement. He can laugh and joke and all those kind of things. But he literally cannot give me a pat on the back because he has no hands. That's the kind of concept when I'm in a conflict with my spouse or my partner, expecting them to do something that they cannot do right then, and then me getting upset because they can't do it. They are not in a space to do it. So as I'm looking at how can I show up, I want to show up. I want to be calm. I want to be empathic. What do I need to do for me so that I can do that? Do I need to remind myself, man, you got this, you're enough, you are a good husband, you're trying really hard, you love your wife, you care about her, you want this relationship to work out, you see her pain, you want to support. Like, do I need to tell myself that kind of stuff to help me do that? That might be what I need to do. Do I just need to breathe? Like, just breathe and say, okay, look, those are some of those skills that you can use, and you're doing that. I love that you say, I'm just hoping that it will go away. It's not going to go away. So I know that you do that. One of the most powerful ways that de-escalates strong emotion is empathic listening. It is a tool that hostage negotiators use all the time to de-escalate the person who is the hostage person. And it's when you feel heard and validated, it calms your brain down and calms your brain down and calms your brain down. And there's a really simple tool to do that when you're listening to your partner, which is just repeat the last 3 words that your partner said. And if that's all you can do, like I'm just gonna repeat the last 3 words they said. I'm gonna just repeat the last 3 words they said. And that's what you're thinking while you're listening to them. And that helps you stay focused. That will work really well. It's very interesting because the guy who taught me how to do that, I watched him tell the person, I'm going to repeat the last 3 words that you said. You just talk about whatever you want to talk about, and I'm just going to repeat the last 3 words that you said, and we'll see where it goes. And the person did not even catch on that he was just repeating the last 3 words that she said. He just sometimes we're afraid they're going to think I'm weird. They're going to think I'm just trying to be their therapist. They really don't, because what happens is like, oh, you heard me. Yes. And then that. And every once in a while, you may make a statement like, and so you're feeling like this? Yeah. Okay. And then the last 3 words you said. If that helps you stay engaged with your intention of like, my intent is I care about my spouse, I care about my partner, I want this relationship to work out, I want this to go well, and you keep that at the forefront of your mind. What can I do to stay present? What can I do to be here, not get defensive? This isn't about me. Words of affirmation for myself, any of those tools that help you stay present, use them. But practice by yourself, journal every day so that you're in a better place to do that.
So in the chat, they said, is it Nicholas James?
Yes.
Okay.
Vichik. Yes.
Thank you.
Him.
I was going to say, I will slaughter that. So
yes, that's
and then they asked you to repeat those columns. Can you repeat the columns that you were talking about, please?
So, yep. If you go to where all the webinars and stuff are listed, on the Thursday and Friday groups that I run, there's a link to the Finding Peace worksheet, and there's a series of columns. You don't have to use all the columns. You could just use a couple. But there's the facts column. What are the facts? What are the wounds? What is the truth? What are my needs? What are my choices? So, and if you wanted to make it simple, what are the facts and what are my choices? The facts are my partner's mad at me because of whatever. What are my choices? What do I want to do? And I just list them out. So you can use the whole thing. You can use 2 or 3 columns, however it works for you. It's pretty flexible, but it is really helpful for people as they're trying to sort out, how do I want to show up? How does shame hijack my ability to show up? What are my needs here? What are my attachment wounds that are being stirred up?
So that's on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, all spelled out, and you'll find that. And you can always email me, Tammy, TAMI at seekingintegrity.com if you get a little lost. So, okay, next question. I'm the betrayer in my relationship. I have been in recovery and have been sober 13 months now. I am having good success understanding and staying in control of my own emotions. The trouble I am having is holding pain for my betrayed partner. Can you share 2 to 3 good techniques to help hold betrayed partner's pain so I can demonstrate my desire to help her heal?
Have your betrayed partner try to describe what the pain is like. What does that betrayal feel like, using like analogies or metaphors? And then in your mind, see if you can go through the history of your life and see if you can find a time when you might have felt something similarly. It's a tool that we use in helping people develop more empathy. So one of the activities that I'll often have couples do is I'll have you think of a time that you got in a conflict, and I'll have you write down all of the emotions that you felt during that situation, And oftentimes what I find is that the person who can only come up with maybe 3 or 4 emotions, they're going to have a harder time having empathy than the person who could come up with 9 or 10 emotions. Because they just don't have the vocabulary to be able to put into words what was going on. So that's why the exercise of the metaphor, like having your partner explain, this is what it feels like. Feels like a hot knife being stuck in my heart and being twisted 4 or 5 times. And then you say, okay, number one, that sounds incredibly painful. That sucks. So just being able to like visualize that metaphor might be able to help you visualize some of what that pain feels like. And then if that literally was happening to my partner, how would I want to respond? Like if it feels like a ton of bricks was being smashed on my face and like my body, like if a ton of bricks was literally being smashed on my partner, what would I want to do? Well, I would want to like find a way. So that that caring, compassionate side of you, listening to the metaphor might help you be able to say, oh my gosh, they are hurting so bad, I want to help, I want to make it better. The other part is, when maybe have I felt like I've had a ton of bricks crushing on my shoulders or a hot knife being stuck? Maybe it was a time when a coworker took credit for something that I did, or a boss embarrassed me in front of a, like, that's what that felt like. Oh, so that's one way. And then saying, and then as you're thinking about that situation, what did it feel like for you? And see if you can come up with a metaphor for what that felt like for you. And then ask your partner, did it feel like this? And your partner will say, yes, that's what it felt like. That's another way of being able to get connection. So part of being able to hold the pain is understanding the pain. What we tend to do when I'm in pain is I want to go right to blame. Well, you did this and you did that. And that's really hard as the person who's being blamed to hold space. I will want to run away. I'll, I'll escape from that pretty quickly. But if I recognize that the blame is actually what Brene Brown says blame is a way to discharge pain and discomfort. If I recognize that my partner is trying to discharge her pain and discomfort, and I say, well, you are really hurting right now. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that pain feels like for you right now? And then they say it, that will calm it down a little bit. That's a way of maybe holding space, saying, now tell me a little bit more, like, I'm trying to conceptualize what that feels like. Can you give me an analogy or a metaphor of what that feels like? Wow, that's really painful. I didn't realize that it was that hurtful for you. It's another way to be able to hold space. So you start talking about the wound itself. Helpful?
I think so. And I was thinking the other thing is, especially if it's coworker or something, not fixing it automatically, like going, oh, well, you should do whatever, it's like being able to hold the space, is challenging without, feeling like it's personal. So, okay, next question. My wife and I both have abandonment wounds. I'm the betrayer, she's the betrayed. When we have heated discussions, her default traumatic response is to fight and mine is to freeze. Unfortunately, our default responses are direct triggered for the other. How do you suggest we manage through this?
So I've mentioned burpees before. It's we've done. You can go back and look at some of the YouTube videos we've done before, but I'll spare you the time. Burpees. I hate burpees. The literal exercise of burpees where you do push up and jump up, and like I won't do them. If my trainer tells me to do them, I will not do them because I
I
hate
still
them
do
so bad.
them.
Well,
I,
so
yeah.
good for you. I won't do them because I hate them. Burpees in relationships are blame, rescue, protest, and escape. So B, blame, R, rescue, P, protest, E, escape. If I'm doing one of the burpees, it inspires my partner to do one of the burpees. So if I blame, it will likely inspire my partner to protest. If I'm protesting, it likely will inspire my partner to rescue me. Try to fix it. That's what rescue looks like. Try to solve all my problems for me. I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to listen. Um, if I am feeling blamed, my partner might escape. And then I might protest that they're escaping, and then they may blame. So we jump around in these four things. So I oftentimes I teach that to my clients, like, here are the burpees. Are you doing them? Now, it's not helpful for you to point out to your partner that they're doing the burpees, because that's blame. That doesn't help. Oh, I am rescuing right now. Oh, I'm noticing that I'm going into escape right now. Oh, I noticed that I was going into protest. So if you even call out what behavior you're doing, oh, I am doing this. I'm doing this because I was hoping that it would help us solve the problem. That's a tool that Sue Johnson uses. I'm going into protest right now because I was hoping that that would bring us together, but it clearly isn't working right now. What I'm really wanting us to do is and say what we want. That might be helpful. So you're owning your behavior. If you do that, it's more likely that your partner will say, "Oh, well, I was blaming, or I was protesting too. I was doing that because I was hoping that we could." And then we've just called out what we're doing, and then we've also stated what our real intention was. My intention was actually to come together and work this out. The other thing is that it might be clear to tell your partner your intention at the beginning of the conversation. Hey, this is what I'm coming to you because I need to work this out. I and instead of jumping into I'm really upset because da 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 da, which is fine, but before you do that, you say I'm coming here because I've been triggered and I really want to be able to find a way to resolve this. And what I'm hoping that we can do is come together and be bonded together. That's really what I'm hoping we can do. Are you willing to have a conversation with me where we get there? And so we've declared our intention at the beginning of the conversation. And then the other partner say, actually, I just came home from work. I'm super exhausted. Can we do that like in an hour when I've had some food and I'm not hangry? Or, yes, let's do it. I'm good. So that we actually are in a place where that will work out really well.
Yeah, and we talked a little or at the beginning too about the timeout. You know, if you need like take a time out and just say we need to come back to this. But I love, well, I don't love them, but I think it's very valuable to have. Can we have a difficult conversation? Like you know, and like you said, not right now. I'm not you know we can do that, but then it's framed that there's going to be a conversation and it isn't going to be this battle and we're going to do the same dance that we keep doing that doesn't really help either one of us. So I love that you're going, let's be intentional. This is what I'm looking to do. You know, we need to have this conversation because we're at a standstill. So there are tools to use, and I think the timeout in the moment and having it be I need 30 minutes. Like I'm coming back, but I need 30 minutes because I don't want this to escalate. I don't want to escalate to the point where, I'm freezing or whatever. I think can be helpful. So, okay. What is the best way to manage shadow of shame feelings? I find it difficult to address how I react to what the shadows are telling me.
So there's a lot. We've done some videos around some of that. Number one is to call it out. Call out which shadow of shame is talking to you. That may be difficult, but it gets a little easier as you start doing it. And so, like, I see you, like, judge, I see you, impotent one, I see you, martyr, I see you. So, hey, I see you, you're talking to me. What are you doing here? What do you want? So people think I'm going crazy, but I'm having conversations with things that don't exist. It's okay. What do you want? What are you doing here? Oh, you're trying to protect me from being rejected. Oh, you're trying to protect me from being abandoned again. You're trying to perfect me, trying to tell me that I'm not enough by doing all these things so I won't be rejected. So I understand what their motive is. Their motive always is, by the way, that they're trying to help you not hurt. They're trying to minimize your pain. So then I will say, thank you. Thank you so much for trying to help me. It ain't helping. The way you're doing it actually makes it worse. This is what I'm going to do instead. And this is how I'm going to get my need met. And I can tell you that 99% of the time when I do that, the shadow's like, oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, I'll come back later then, I guess. And doesn't have anything else to say. So call it out, find out what it wants, then find a healthy way to get what it wants, and then offer gratitude for it trying to help you in a way that hasn't been helpful. And then it will go away.
Talk about you have a course coming up. Would you please share,
Sure.
take a moment and share that, because I think it would be a valuable option for some of the people here.
Yes. So a lot of you have been asking a lot of relationship questions. I have a finding peace. I'm going to put it in the chat box. So I have a finding peace in relationships class that's coming up. It's a 9-week class. And part of how it works is there's a series of short videos that you get every week with homework assignments. You also get a deck of cards that help you have conversations with your partner, that guide you through some of these conversations that a lot of the people in the class still use. They still pull out their cards when they're having difficult conversations with their partner. And then we meet 2 hours live every week for 9 weeks and go over the homework, figure out where you're stuck, and try to help you with that. So if you're interested, I put the link there in the chat box. You can learn more about that there. Thank you.
So the next question, do you think empathy can be taught? I think it can be taught and it can be learned. My partner has always claimed that he has no empathy and was taught not to have it through military service. Can it really be learned? Yes. Yes, I see this miracle happen in our treatment program. I'm like it. Yeah, yes.
So your husband was taught not to have empathy in the military because he couldn't do his job as a soldier if he did. It's a very strange profession as a soldier, because if you actually sat and thought about what you were doing, killing another person, there's no way that you could actually function. And truthfully, that is why every 22 minutes a veteran is committing suicide in the United States, because they weren't taught how to manage their emotions and how to work through the incongruent feelings of hurting another human being and seeing death and destruction in their body being blown up and all of that stuff. They were told that if we wanted you to have feelings, we would have issued them to you. And so he's not lying when he says they never taught me how to manage my emotions. And he's not alone in those veterans who are trying desperately to figure out, what in the world do I do with these emotions that I have that I don't even know how to put words to. Can he learn? Absolutely. In one of the best environments for veterans to learn is with other veterans. So if there's any VA PTSD groups that are in your area that he might qualify to attend for free, that may have absolutely nothing to do with addiction, but have everything to do with PTSD and support, that would be a place that I would encourage him to go to. Those are offered in many communities, but it is possible to learn. If he has a desire to learn, then it can be learned. And there's a part that is probably desperate to learn, because otherwise it's just bottled up inside and it explodes. And then he is so riddled with shame that he hates himself for that too.
Well, and your relationship isn't a war or the military. And so applying what was learned across the board for everybody is very isolating for him. Like Troy was saying, he probably wants desperately to, on some level, attach, and probably is also terrified of it because it's easier to keep everything compartmentalized and just keep going like, yep, nope, nope, don't, but it doesn't, it keeps us disconnected from the people that love us and that we, love, if we can't connect to them on a, in a healthy way. So. Okay, next question. Why is the focus always on them, their wounds? I came in just as wounded, kept showing up to do the work, got lied to, manipulated, and withheld from. Now, after decades, they say they want to show up and mean it. This time, we are years into recovery. It seems to just be about me staying here for them. What about me and my wounding? I assume this is a partner from.
So I hear you, and it isn't just about their wounding. We had been speaking earlier about you are just wounded. Your betrayal wound is profound, and your job is not to be there to heal their wound. It's not. They have to find ways to do that. Now, you can help and support and provide emotional care if you want to, but that's not your job. Just like if I had a burn or if my leg was severely cut, there's nobody else in the nurses and doctors can stitch it up and do all that stuff, but nobody else's job but to heal my wound but me. I got to eat right. I got to take my meds right. Like I got to do that stuff to heal my wounds. Nobody else can do it. Now they can support, they can provide care, and that's wonderful. But it's not your job. You have your own wounds, and that's the dilemma. We got two people in this relationship who are wounded, who are trying to find ways to connect and come together, and it is a challenge, and it's not easy. That's why we have these support groups. That's why we encourage the women to go, the spouses, on every other Thursday. First, I don't know, some Thursdays.
Every other Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, he's working just with partners on wounds, attachment wounds. He works every week with them guys. That's just how the schedule is right now.
Yeah. But. And we also have several other betrayed partner support groups at sexandhealingrelationships.com too, because we recognize it's not just about the addict. In fact, if this relationship is going to heal, both partners need some healing.
But you can't heal each other. It's not fair for you to be responsible for healing the addict. And I get all the time the addicts wanting, how do I help her heal, male addict? And I'm going, you taking care of you and fixing you helps her heal. Otherwise, it's just a diversion of like, oh, like I'm going to just focus on her. You're still not dealing with you, which was the problem. So you guys really do. That's why we created all these support things for each of you to get support, to get help. And then you learn tools to be able to come together, and it won't be pretty from the get-go, but you can learn, and you can learn to do it differently and better. So, okay, next question. We're running out of time, but I want to get, what has made you successful to stay in recovery? How long did it take before you felt like you really had a hold of addiction? Oh, I still don't think I have hold of addiction, and it's been decades. So, and were you able to make better choices as responding automatically as you did in the past?
So I am right there with you, Tammy. Like I'm not sure I have a hold on addiction. I recognize the wiring in my brain is there for good, but I have learned how to manage the shame a whole lot better. So the whole reason why I wrote the book Finding Peace, I wrote it for me. I was sitting 20 years ago, I was sitting in a drug and alcohol rehab facility as an intern, even though I'd never done drugs or alcohol, thinking, what in the world can I do to help these people? I don't know anything about it. And they started to tell me their stories. And as they started to tell me their stories, I realized they were helping me. For the first time in my life, I realized I was a sex addict. I didn't even know that it was a thing. And that was my beginning journey, and me starting to put some of the pieces together of how do I manage that. And so for 20 years, I've been working on and then created the model 10 years ago, the Finding Peace model that I started to teach for myself first and then other clients, so that I didn't get stuck in shame all the time. That I learned how to reach out and get some support. So I'm not sure I'm answering the question, but it's been 20 years and I still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, like last week, I was at two of my 12-step meetings because it was a heck of a week and I needed the grounding. So I never pretend like addiction is, oh, I'm way past it. Now, most hours of most days, I've learned the tools to be able to deal with life. That's part of the promises of the 12 steps is we will intuitively know how to handle situations which choose to baffle us. That came true for me a long time ago. Most of the time, every now and then I go, I need to go back to a meeting or, whatever. And I've said this before in a webinar too, the tools, COVID was tough on me, has been really tough. I have leaned into the very things that I learned initially in recovery. I've had to lean into them hard. So it's a journey. I'm never going to be recovered. It's life. I'm still learning stuff. I was telling Troy at the beginning of this, I have been using the labels, oh, that's the judge. I hear the judge's voice. I'm using those tools and that helps me in the moment. And, like I said, decades into recovery, it's always a journey. Okay. Is it fine? And it's a fine and questionable line between can't and won't for the addict. Is it really, I can't or won't? He just chosen to withhold a lot. It depends. If it's really early on, he probably doesn't. I said the other day, it's like asking a kindergartner to write a college dissertation. They can't yet. They can learn to. So yeah. Unfortunately, I hear often from partners who go, well, he's been abstinent, they say recovery for 60 days. Why isn't he all better? It's in AA, we talk about, putting the plug in the jug is just the beginning of the journey. It doesn't fix everything. Now we have to look at us, which is really the problem. So for some, they won't. Like when somebody's been hanging around recovery for a couple of years and they still are not doing, you're not seeing change, then now I'm at the I won't. That's my thoughts. What are yours?
To me, I'm like, is that the impotent one talking? You can't and you never, or is it what's the truth? And so challenging the shame and speaking the truth. It's cutting through the shame talk.
Okay, so last question is, how do you deal? Oh, sorry. How do you deal with a sexaholic spouse who continues to deny, take responsibility for, or gaslight me about almost everything I question him about, such as several incognito reports with covenant? So lots of let's keep it in touch. And anyway, so apparently this person is an active addiction. And how so thoughts?
So, okay, I can't speak specifically to your situation other than what I'm reading here. When the first thing that I do when we pull out the finding peace worksheet is what are the facts? And the facts are the things that I can see, smell, taste, touch, hear. Not story, not interpretations. It's what evidence do I have? And you have evidence right in front of you. So the second part of the finding peace worksheet are what wound got stirred up for me, betrayal, and what's my negative core belief about me, about my situation, not about him. That's a piece that we would take a look at and explore. Because if we look at the facts, and the facts are like, there they are, and it seems to be a pattern. It's not a fluke. This is happening over and over, and there's also evidence that he's not telling the truth. What does that say about you? Are you believing the lie that I'm not enough, that I'm not worthy, that I'm not undeserving of being told the truth? Because those are all lies, by the way. You are enough. You matter. You are worthy of telling the truth. We skip all the way over to the choices column. Well, what are your choices? Not what are his choices, but what are your choices? Based on these facts, what are your choices? What are you going to do that is in the best interest of yourself and your heart and your family and your well-being? That's a tough one, and I can't give you the answers for that, but that's where that work comes for you of like, I can see that this is happening. I really wish he would stop. Doesn't look like he is. So what are my choices? What am I going to do for me, my well-being, and how do I remind myself? It's the thing I said at the beginning. The hardest thing that we do is learning to remember that we are worthy of love and belonging, regardless of the behavior of somebody else, especially when they're behaving like this. How do I remind myself I am worthy of love and belonging? I'm worthy of dignity, respect, being told the truth, and he's not. So what are my choices? How am I going to respond to that? And the interesting thing is, Stephen Stosny says, and I've seen it happen, when I stop hustling for my worth, Brene Brown's words, hustling for my worth, and I embrace it, the other person feels it and they stop the manipulation because it no longer has any effect. They either they stop because it doesn't work. It's just, I don't believe you, and this is what I'm going to do, and it stops it in its tracks because I remember that I'm worthy of love and belonging, and I am worthy of protecting myself, defending myself, setting myself up for something that's going to be okay and safe for me and the people I love. So hopefully that's helpful.
It is, and we don't have time for more. I'm sorry. So because we already ran over, but yeah, the healthy boundaries. What's going to be healthy for you? So join us. So for partners, please join Troy on alternating. Tomorrow is John Taylor's the second part of the Mother and Mesh Men. So join that, and then next week would be Troy's again. So join that, and then Fridays, if you're a male addict, please join Troy on Friday mornings. But lots of videos from Troy, and join his couples work, whatever. Keep coming back. We've got lots more resources for you. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Troy.
You're welcome. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.